You think you can just walk in here? I whispered to the darkness as I crept up the gravel path, the night air thick with the scent of damp soil and cedar from the old root cellar behind my farmhouse, my boots crunching softly against the scattered stones, every step alerting me to the smallest sound, the wind rustling through the oak trees carrying the faint, metallic echo of movement that didn't belong to me, a shadow shifting just beyond the flicker of the porch light. And that's when I saw her, Karen Whitmore, her figure, outlined against the dim glow from my garage window, prying at the iron latch like she thought it was just another ordinary evening. The air electric with tension as I crouched behind the wooden railing, gripping my flashlight and the phone in my pocket, trying not to breathe too loudly, every instinct screaming that something was off, my heart hammering against my ribs as memories of past disputes flashed through my mind, the petty fines, the notices, the way she'd strutted through the neighborhood with that smug smile, thinking she had the upper hand. And now here she was, thinking she could bypass every boundary and protocol, thinking she could just take what wasn't hers without consequence. The faint scent of her perfume cutting through the earthy aroma of the cellar, making me keenly aware of how close she was to crossing a line, the gravel crunch beneath a stray step echoing louder than intended, and I froze, letting the seconds stretch like hours, the wind carrying the distant hum of the highway and the faint whistle of a night owl. And then I saw it, her hand brushing against the weathered wood, testing the lock, sliding along the grooves as if she knew the mechanisms intimately, and I realized that I had to act, but not recklessly, every action deliberate, every breath measured, letting her think she had the advantage while I prepared to counter, the adrenaline and anticipation mingling in the air, the quiet of the rural night punctuated only by the soft creak of the cellar door swaying under her pressure. And I thought of all the months I had spent maintaining this place, preserving the legacy my grandfather had left me, the countless hours tending the land, repairing the hinges, cataloging every barrel of preserved vegetables and root crops that held the essence of my family's history. And I knew that tonight was not just about a trespasser. It was about defending that legacy in a way that left no doubt, no margin for misunderstanding, letting the law and evidence work for me, while I maintained the calm exterior, ready to capture every motion, every slip, every trace that would tell the story later. The faint scent of cedar mixing with the cool night air as I adjusted the flashlight to catch the glint off the iron latch, my fingers brushing against the rough wood railing for support, the anticipation of confrontation mounting, knowing that I had to remain invisible, patient, and ready, the quiet hum of the fridge from the farmhouse kitchen faint in the background. And every detail mattered, the shadow of her arm moving, the subtle shift of her weight, the faint scrape as metal kissed wood, the way her coat brushed the edges of the cellar door, and I reminded myself, stay calm, Ethan, observe, wait, and let this play out. Exactly as it should, the wind carrying a chill across my neck, the smell of damp leaves and earth grounding me, keeping me aware that tonight would define how boundaries were enforced, how respect was demanded, and how justice, even in the quietest moments, could be inevitable. The air around the farmhouse settled into a tense quiet as I stepped back from the cellar door, the gravel crunching under my boots with each deliberate movement, the scent of earth and wood lingering in the cool night air, the moon casting long shadows across the yard, highlighting the rows of garden beds and the wooden fence that had stood for decades. Reminders of the care and patience invested in this property over generations, my mind running through every detail, every plan I had prepared. To protect this place, the faint hum of the farmhouse generator in the distance providing a low constant background as I crouched near the porch railing, my hands steady on the flashlight, every muscle coiled with anticipation, listening to the subtle sounds of Karen shifting her weight, the soft scrape of her shoes against the cellar threshold, the way she paused at times as if testing her surroundings, and I reminded myself to breathe slowly, letting the tension build without tipping her off, observing her movements like a student studying a delicate experiment, knowing that each gesture could provide crucial evidence, the cool night air carrying the faint aroma of cedar and pine, the distant hoot of an owl punctuating the silence, reminding me that the world outside our little farm continued on its natural rhythm, while the drama unfolded here, the smell of the damp soil grounding me, keeping my focus razor sharp, my eyes scanning for reflections off metal, the glint of a latch, the subtle shift of her coat as she reached towards something. And I thought about the legacy in the root cellar, the rows of neatly stacked preserves, jars of pickled vegetables, canned fruits, all labeled and dated meticulously, every shelf a testament to the years of care and attention passed down from my grandfather. The way he had taught me to respect the land, to respect the work that goes into creating and preserving, and I felt a surge of determination, a quiet confidence that the rules, the law, and careful observation were on my side, that this was not a random encounter but a challenge I was ready to meet. Every sense alert, the faint chill of the night brushing against my skin, my fingertips brushing the rough wooden railing, the flashlight beam dancing across the textures of the cellar door, picking up every groove and dent, the shadows accentuating the contrast between the weathered wood and the glimmering metal of the latch, and I mentally ran through the steps I would take, documenting everything, capturing every detail with the phone camera, making note of angles, distances, positions, and timing, each second stretched with suspense, the anticipation of the arrival of the authorities heightening every sensation, the night suddenly alive with potential, each creak and rustle amplified, a reminder of how fragile control can be and how careful attention and patience can shift the balance. The breeze carrying the faint scent of moss and grass from the edges of the garden, mixing with the warmer aroma of soil warmed by the afternoon sun, grounding me in the physical reality even as my mind raced through the plan, the flashlight beam steady and unflinching, every detail recorded mentally and digitally, ready to transform this tense, quiet moment into evidence of order, protection, and justice, each heartbeat measured, steady, a rhythm that matched the deliberate, unhurried strategy one had cultivated, knowing that in the end, the truth would be clear, and the careful patience of observation and planning would reveal itself in the unfolding resolution, the subtle tension coiling in the night air, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant sound of the highway, all reinforcing the sense that this property, this heritage, and the work of generations was mine to protect, and I was ready. I crouched lower, keeping my breath steady, the flashlight beam sweeping slowly across the yard and the cellar door, every texture illuminated in stark relief, the rough wood, the old iron latch, the chipped paint, the shadows falling at odd angles across the garden beds, each detail a potential clue, each sound a signal, the wind rustling the leaves in a soft whisper as if echoing my own heartbeat. My fingers brushing the coarse railing as I made mental notes of her movements, Karen shifting, lightly, testing the threshold, her posture cautious yet oblivious to the meticulous observation. I could feel the weight of the night pressing in, the cool air brushing against my face, the faint smell of soil mixing with the distant aroma of a bonfire from a neighbor down the lane, grounding me, keeping me connected to the world outside this tense moment. I recalled every prior interaction, the petty fines, the notices, the casual disregard she had shown for boundaries, and I realized that all those small infractions were preparing me for this exact instant, the perfect setup for documenting her overreach and asserting control without confrontation, my phone camera ready, lens focused, recording every subtle action, every hesitation, every misstep, knowing that these pieces would weave together into an irrefutable narrative of accountability. My mind raced through the sequence, the timing, the angles, the clarity of the light, imagining how it would all appear when reviewed, the thought sharpening my focus, intensifying my awareness, the flashlight beam steady as I adjusted it, catching the faint gleam on the latch and the outline of her hand, a flicker of movement, and I noted the minute shift, every detail becoming part of the record, the quiet tension stretching out as seconds ticked by, the distant call of an owl punctuating the night, the soft hum of the generator a constant undercurrent. I reminded myself that patience was as important as observation, letting her think she had the advantage while I gathered evidence, every sense engaged, the smell of cedar and the cool air merging, grounding me as I plotted the next steps, the careful attention to detail, the patience, the preparation, all coalescing into a plan that relied on restraint and precision, knowing that a single misstep on her part or mine could alter the outcome. And as I crouched there, eyes fixed on the cellar door, the faint creak of the latch and the subtle shift of her coat, I felt a surge of resolve. The night, thick with anticipation, every sound amplified, every shadow scrutinized, knowing that soon, carefully, deliberately, the law, the preparation, and the patient observation would converge to ensure that justice would be served, that boundaries would be respected, and that the legacy of the land and the care poured into the root cellar would remain intact, secure under my watchful eye and steady hand. Karen shifted abruptly as the cellar door held firm, the faint scrape of her shoes against the threshold echoing softly in the night, and I adjusted the flashlight, casting long beams across the wooden beams and rows of neatly stacked root vegetables, every jar and container lined with precision. The scent of earth and cured produce mingling with the crisp night air, grounding me as I observed her, noting the subtle hesitation in her posture, the way she lingered near the latch, testing it. Without success, and I reminded myself to remain patient, letting her think she had control while I cataloged every detail for later, the gravel crunch under my boots a constant rhythm as I shifted slightly, eyes fixed on her movements, the chill of the night brushing against my neck, carrying the faint aroma of pine and wet soil from the surrounding garden. The faint hum of the farmhouse generator in the distance adding a steady undertone to the silence, each sound amplified by the quiet of the rural night. The way the moonlight fell across the roof of the cellar and highlighted the contours of her coat and the glint of her tools. Every observation carefully stored in my mind, the memory of past disputes with Karen reinforcing my focus, the petty fines, the notices, the casual overreach, all building up to this precise moment where patience and preparation would yield results. I crouched lower, adjusting my position to get a better angle on the latch, my fingers brushing the rough wood railing for support, the subtle scent of cedar mixing with the damp soil, reminding me of the long hours spent maintaining this property, the care and history embedded in every beam and plank, and I knew that documenting this with precision was as important as the act of securing the cellar itself, the tension in the air thick and almost tangible, stretching each second into a measure of anticipation. The faint rustle of leaves carried by a gentle breeze, the distant call of an owl marking time in the darkness, reinforcing the sense that the world continued beyond this moment, while the outcome here was entirely in my hands, and I felt the surge of quiet confidence, the knowledge that every careful action, every observed detail, every moment of restraint would combine to create a clear, undeniable record, the night alive with tension, every sense alert, the smell of soil, the cool brush of air against my skin, the faint scent of Karen's perfume drifting and heightening the focus, and I reminded myself, steady and deliberate, that this was not about confrontation but about control, evidence, and the assertion of rightful boundaries, that patience would ensure the balance tipped in my favor, the cellar, the jars, the wooden beams, and the land itself standing as witnesses to the meticulous preparation, and as Karen tested the latch again, oblivious to my detailed record-keeping, I could feel the culmination of every prior effort, every careful step of observation, every moment of planning aligning perfectly, the night thick with anticipation, the rural silence surrounding us, and I remained composed, ready to let the next moments unfold according to the plan I had crafted, knowing that justice and protection of the legacy were imminent. The night deepened, the moonlight casting silver streaks across the yard and the roof of the farmhouse, highlighting the textures of weathered wood and stone, every shadow stretching long and sharp, and I kept my eyes fixed on the root cellar door, the faint hum of the generator steady in the background, grounding the scene in quiet continuity, my fingers brushing against the rough wood railing as I crouched, the scent of damp earth and cedar blending with the crisp night air, each breath deliberate, each heartbeat measured, as Karen continued her cautious movements, testing the latch and adjusting her weight, unaware that every action was being documented, the subtle creak of the door under her fingertips a constant reminder of her overreach, and I noted the way the moonlight glinted off her hair and the edge of her jacket, details that would become important in recording the evidence, the stillness of the night amplifying every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the occasional gust of wind moving through the trees, carrying the faint aroma of pine and soil. anchoring me to the environment as I planned my next move, the months of preparation. The careful observation of prior interactions, the petty fines and unjust notices, all converging in this single moment where patience and attention to detail would make the difference. The flashlight beamed steady, highlighting the latch, the grooves in the wood, the subtle movements of her hands as she explored the lock, each micromotion noted mentally, the quiet tension coiling around us like a living thing. The cool night air brushing my skin, the earthy scent grounding me, my mind racing, yet controlled. The awareness of history and care embedded in the cellar, the preservation of root vegetables, jars lined with precision, every label and date a testament to careful stewardship. And I thought about how important it was to maintain control without confrontation, to allow the law and the evidence to speak for themselves, the anticipation stretching each second, making every small movement significant, the quiet night alive with subtle drama. And I reminded myself to remain calm, deliberate, and patient, recording every detail, every hesitation, every subtle error, every misstep, every angle, knowing that when the authorities arrived, the evidence would be irrefutable, the subtle tension of the moment magnified by the moonlight, the rustling leaves, the faint hum of distant wildlife, all contributing to a cinematic sense of heightened awareness. And as I adjusted my position, keeping the flashlight beam steady across the latch in her hands, I felt the culmination of months of careful planning and observation, the quiet certainty that patience, attention to detail, and the careful use of evidence would ensure that boundaries were respected, legacy preserved, and justice achieved. The night stretching on with every subtle sound, every shadow, every scent, every movement recorded in meticulous detail, ready to serve as testimony that the careful, patient, and deliberate actions of one person could uphold the integrity of a place, a property, and a legacy that had been nurtured and protected for generations. As the night deepened, I crouched closer to the railing, the flashlight steady in my grip, casting long beams across the root cellar door and the surrounding garden, the faint smell of damp soil mingling with cedar and the distant aroma of cut grass from earlier in the evening. Every detail sharpened in my awareness, the subtle creak of the latch under Karen Whitmore's persistent probing catching my attention, each movement recorded mentally, the cool night air brushing my skin and heightening my senses, the faint rustle of leaves from the old oak and the distant call of a night bird punctuating the otherwise quiet night, grounding me in the rural environment while my mind cataloged every motion and shift, her hands brushing the wood, testing the edges, her weight subtly adjusting, and I noted every nuance, every small hesitation, each tiny error that would become proof of her overreach, the months of observation, the previous minor disputes, the petty fines, and the unjust notices, all converging into this precise moment where preparation and attention to detail would yield the outcome. The soft hum of the farmhouse generator in the background providing a constant undertone, the shadows stretching across the garden beds, and the cellar roof giving depth to the scene, the moonlight reflecting faintly on the metal latch and highlighting the edges of her coat, reminding me of the care invested in this property over generations, the neat rows of root vegetables and preserves. Inside the cellar, a silent testimony to my family's legacy, the labels and jars aligned perfectly, each one a marker of time and meticulous work, and I felt the importance of remaining calm, deliberate, and patient, every breath measured, every heartbeat steady, every flicker of the flashlight deliberate, the tension in the night thick, stretching each second, amplifying the significance of every sound, every shadow, every scent, and I reminded myself to observe quietly, record carefully, and let the evidence speak for itself, knowing that when the authorities arrived, the meticulous documentation, the careful planning, and the steady patience would leave no doubt. The cool air, the faint scent of pine, the subtle vibration of the ground beneath my feet as I shifted slightly, all keeping me connected to the moment, every sense engaged, the scene alive with quiet tension, the anticipation coiling around us like a living presence. Every subtle movement noted, every shadow traced, every sound cataloged, preparing for the arrival of justice. The calm exterior maintained even as my mind raced through the steps, the angles, the perspectives, the proof that would ensure the property, the cellar, and the legacy remained secure. The night carrying the mixture of scents and sounds that sharpened every perception, the garden, the fence, the oak trees, the cellar itself, all witnesses to the patience and care exercised, and I remained poised, ready to act with precision, letting each detail accumulate until the arrival of the law would confirm that boundaries were respected, that meticulous observation and preparation had ensured the protection of what had been entrusted to me, and the night, alive with tension, held the promise that careful patience and attention to detail would soon resolve the intrusion. I took a slow breath, the cool night air brushing my face as I crouched behind the railing. The flashlight beamed steady on the cellar door, every shadow, every subtle movement of Karen Whitmore recorded in my mind and on my phone. The faint scent of damp cedar and earth mixing with the cool breeze, grounding me as I observed her, the soft creak of the latch echoing with each tentative motion she made, and I reminded myself to remain patient, letting the tension build, knowing that the precise moment to act was imminent. The rows of neatly stacked jars and vegetables inside the cellar standing as a testament to the care and legacy that had been entrusted to me, each detail meticulously maintained over decades, the faint hum of the farmhouse generator providing a steady background, the distant call of a night bird punctuating the quiet, every sense engaged, the cool soil under my boots, the faint rustle of leaves overhead, the subtle shift of Karen's weight, the small hesitation in her hand movements, each element amplifying the suspense, the moonlight casting silver streaks across the yard and highlighting the textures of wood and metal, the latch glinting under the beam of the flashlight, and I ran through the plan silently, the exact sequence of steps that would allow evidence to be captured while boundaries were maintained, patience and careful observation forming the strategy. Every second stretched into deliberate anticipation, the quiet night alive with subtle sounds and scents, the garden beds, the wooden fence, the oak trees, all witnesses to the unfolding drama, each movement noted, each detail logged mentally and digitally, preparing for the eventual resolution, the cool air sharpening focus, the earthy aroma of the cellar combining with the faint scent of pine from the nearby woods, keeping me aware, alert, steady, and ready, and as Karen shifted again, unaware of the meticulous documentation taking place, the subtle tension in the air coiling and building, I felt the quiet power of patience and preparation, the knowledge that, when the authorities arrived, the evidence would be irrefutable, every shadow, every creak, every scent contributing to the story that would prove the careful stewardship and protection of this land and cellar, and I allowed myself a small, steadying exhale, knowing that the moment of truth was approaching, the night alive with anticipation, the cool breeze, the distant sounds of the rural landscape, and the faint glow of the moon all merging into a cinematic clarity, every detail accounted for, every motion observed, the plan in place, and the careful watch, the preparation, the patient observation all aligning perfectly to ensure that boundaries were respected, legacy preserved, and justice would unfold exactly as it should, the night holding its breath along with me as the final steps drew near. I heard the distant wail of sirens before I saw the flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness, the rural night transforming into a stage of anticipation as I crouched behind the railing, the flashlight steady in my hand, illuminating the texture of the wooden cellar door and the surrounding garden, the scent of damp earth mixing with cedar and pine, grounding me in the moment. And I felt the tension in the air shift as Karen Whitmore froze, the subtle creak of the latch under her fingers, the way her coat shifted as she paused mid-motion, every detail recorded, every nuance captured, the moonlight reflecting off the edges of her tools and the metal latch, highlighting the precision of each action, the soft rustle of leaves and the hum of the distant generator amplifying the quiet suspense, and I reminded myself to stay patient, letting the evidence and the law work in tandem. The careful observation of each movement a key part of the unfolding resolution, the root cellar standing as a testament to generations of care, every jar and vegetable preserved in perfect order, the scent of soil and cured produce filling the air, keeping me focused, as the first officer stepped onto the gravel path, boots crunching softly, the flashlight beam catching the gleam of the metal badges and the lines of authority. Karen's confident posture faltering as she realized the culmination of months of preparation and patient observation, the subtle anxiety in her movements growing as each second passed. The night alive with the collision of anticipation and inevitability, and I documented every moment, every hesitation, every misstep, the careful angles of the camera capturing her presence and proving the overreach, the generator's low hum, the distant owl, the faint rustle of leaves, every natural sound framing the scene like a cinematic score, the moonlight casting elongated shadows across the yard, the fence, and the cellar, each surface holding the weight of history and legacy. And as the officers approached, their voices calm yet authoritative, the small distance between the porch and the cellar measured, every step deliberate, every gesture reinforcing the control I had patiently maintained. Karen's expression shifting from confidence to uncertainty, the subtle tremor in her stance betraying the realization that the careful observation, preparation, and documentation had left her without advantage. The night thick with suspense as the situation unfolded. The rural silence punctuated only by the approaching voices, the moonlight highlighting every texture, every surface, every nuance, and I allowed a slow, steady breath to escape, knowing that the culmination of patience, preparation, and evidence-based observation would soon secure the integrity of the property, the root cellar, and the legacy preserved within, the night alive with clarity, every detail accounted for, and the inevitable resolution settling into place as justice quietly, yet undeniably, asserted itself. The first light of dawn began to filter through the oak trees, painting the gravel driveway and the farmhouse roof with soft gold hues, and I stood quietly, taking in the stillness of the early morning, the root cellar secured behind me, the door locked and unyielding, every jar and container inside a testament to years of careful preservation, the scent of cured vegetables and earth blending with the crisp morning air, grounding me as I reflected on the night's events. Karen Whitmore now, standing outside, her posture subdued, the earlier confidence replaced by the slow recognition of consequence, and I felt the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed with patience, precision, and unwavering attention to detail. The moonlight faded, leaving only the natural illumination of the rising sun, shadows stretching long across the garden beds and the fence, the subtle sounds of birds beginning their morning calls, the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, each sound emphasizing the calm after the tension, the generator humming faintly in the background, a reminder of continuity and normalcy. I surveyed the yard, noting the careful alignment of the plants, the undisturbed gravel, the wooden beams of the cellar standing strong, each element a marker of what had been preserved, and I allowed a slow exhale, the adrenaline of the night giving way to a grounded sense of accomplishment, the evidence meticulously recorded, every subtle motion documented, ensuring that the integrity of the property and the legacy contained within the root cellar was protected, the cool morning air filling my lungs, the faint scent of pine and damp soil reinforcing the connection to the land, and I thought about the months of preparation, the careful observation of Karen's patterns, the patience that had been required to allow events to unfold exactly as planned, the subtle rhythm of the rural morning emphasizing the resolution, the sunlight glinting off the metal latch and the edges of the wooden door, highlighting the solidity of the protection put in place, the faint chirping of crickets fading as daytime took hold, the distant sound of a tractor starting up in a neighboring field adding to the sense of ordinary life resuming, and I felt the weight of legacy and responsibility, the satisfaction that careful attention, patience, and methodical observation had preserved what mattered most, that boundaries had been respected and justice had quietly asserted itself without unnecessary confrontation. Karen's retreating footsteps fading into the distance, the subtle tension dissolved, leaving a sense of order restored, the garden, the cellar, and the farmhouse all bathed in the warm glow of morning, the knowledge that the night's vigilance had ensured everything remained intact, and I finally allowed myself to walk slowly toward the porch, the gravel crunching softly under my boots, the air carrying the gentle aroma of morning dew and pine, each step affirming that the careful patience and deliberate planning had secured the property, the root cellar, and the legacy for another day. The calm of the early hours settling around me, the rural landscape stretching wide and uninterrupted, a quiet testament to the fact that justice, patient, careful, and inevitable, had been served.